Coming to you from the Strings and Things studio in Ventura, California, this is the Strings Unraveled Book Club. All right. Yay.
You know, before we started, I intended to look up like how many of these we've done, and I forgot. So I don't know what number it is, but I thought I was gonna look. Maybe I'll do that while you're.
At least done a year's worth of books, I think, at least.
I'll look when you're doing the synopsis thing. But anyway, if we sound a little bit different, we have new recording equipment, so hopefully it's better. Everybody has their own microphone now, so hopefully you'll be able to hear everybody.
If any of us is quiet, it's our own fault.
Yeah, we're still learning how this works because
what was that?
If it doesn't work, it's my fault.
Wait, you didn't hear me just now?
Yeah, what you didn't say came out loud and clear.
I think it was dare me.
I wish you could see the faces.
Sound recording is not a talent of mine just yet. Maybe it will be, but so maybe we'll get better. I don't know. We'll see how this sounds when I go and edit the podcast. Anyway. This is our book club, and I'm going to let Karin take over because this was her pick, and while she does that, I'm going to see if I can figure out what episode this is.
So this month we did, we read a book from one of my favorite authors, Lisa C., called The Island of Sea Women, S-E-A, not like S-E-E, which is her last name. The synopsis of it is like this. Her book introduces us to two young girls, Young Suk and Mija, living in the island of Jeju in Korea. They become best friends as they train and join an ancient collective of all female divers called the Henyo. But as the years go on, and it's like an 80-year friendship that the book spans, Young Suk and Mija must face the harsh realities of their respective lives, which draw them both closer together and further apart. So that's the basic synopsis of the book. First of all, did you guys like it?
This is gonna make like my top list of all the books we've done.
I really enjoyed it. It was a long book, and I listened to it on Audible. I didn't read it, and I took my time with it, and it was enjoyable for the most part. It was very hard to listen to at some other parts, but it's definitely going to be one of those that sticks with you. This is
I got very emotional.
This is our 12th episode, so this marks 1 year of book club.
Awesome.
I had a feeling it was significant.
Yeah, this is a good one because it was just so good. I think this comes from Carol. She's really the one who turned us all onto this, our girl Carol. I love this book. I mean, that's really...
I mean, to me, this told me a story of women empowerment that where it is the culture. It was the culture of this area was all about women empowerment. Sometimes where men stayed home and took care of the kids, and the women went out into the sea and faced harsh, cold, but they were like a sisterhood with all the good parts and the bad parts that come with that.
I think that it's kind of interesting to line it up with the current work life of women in the world. My husband was very offended by these news stories because he's really, I've been saying he's really been the primary caregiver of our children for the last year or so. But women go out in the world. These women go out and they dive and they get the family's livelihood. But it does come up again and again that they still carry the weight of the household running.
Oh, yeah.
And that the husbands do. And I don't know if this was a little tongue-in-cheeky that this is how working husbands view their stay-at-home wives, that mothers, that all they, because at some point they say all that they do is mind the children and have dinner ready.
Yeah, they cook and they mind the children.
But truly they go on to iterate that, like, we do the laundry, we do the mending, we care for all the fields, the wet and the dry fields, and they do lists like these are the things,
elders in the family,
right? These are the things the men don't do, and truly their list was dinner and children. Which is no small task. But for women, these are women who are doing because you also know that those women are doing the cooking and caring for children as well. We see it again and again.
Yeah. And when they say wet and dry field, they consider the ocean where they go out and harvest. That's the wet field. But besides doing that, they are also farming. They also have a plot of land.
Any of the farming, the wet or the dry field.
Which was a little nuts to me.
That's what
that
I was
it worked
thinking
out that way.
How come they don't? how come they're not in charge of the dry fields and
Right.
the women are in
Oh,
charge of the wet
No,
fields?
okay, you know, like how we have mommy and me days at the park.
Yeah.
That the men had sort of that, where they got together and occasionally had a drink, but they were just watching the kids play out someplace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had daddy and me
Why
days.
couldn't they go to the field and have
And
daddy
work.
and me at the
Yeah.
field? This seems like a very
Well-
bad organization of labor.
Exactly, because it was still up to the women to train their daughters to also do the farming.
Right.
Yeah. Well, daddy
So-
could train son and daughter.
It was a.
Well,
it,
but-
it was. It's definitely an interesting dynamic
interesting,
because it's not
for
like anything
sure.
else in the world, especially at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
This
my
takes
goodness.
place. It starts in like the 30s.
It's late 1930s, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, it goes through a couple, it goes through the World War II, it goes through the
Mhm.
Korean War, it
Mhm.
goes through various governmental
The
changes.
Vietnam War.
April 1938
Yeah.
to sometime 2009.
And just maybe a
The
little
movie.
background of what the Sea Women here. This is a reflection, the story of real. The characters may be fictional, but they reflect the culture of real women of Korea that says have supported their families for millennia by diving for various seafood, and they go out in in groups, and okay, not only that, but we'll get into this later, but sometimes they traveled for this job,
Mhm.
which to me was like, wow, that's just amazing. And they're going in all kinds of things. But so the Haenyeo or sea women of Korea are real people who have provided for the families. That say they dive up to 30 feet deep. There's no underwater breathing aids. They dig up creatures from the ocean floor by hand and bring them to the surface. It says this incredible practice has been going on for thousands of years, and the diving tradition of the Haenyeo continues to be passed down to new generations of women. Some of the
Not
women
according
going
to
into
the book.
not according to
Well,
the
there's
book,
a lot less nowadays. They
a
still
lot
exist,
less.
but
But during that time, you had like women in their 60s and 70s still going out and diving.
uh-huh.
Although there was a certain age where they were kind of told to sort of step back and
Right.
retire, the ripe old age of 55,
I
which I'm like,
mean, I want to retire at 55.
What?
Yeah.
I'd be kind of retired by
That was
now.
some hard work though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't have to live as
You
long.
know, but retire means from the wet fields. I don't think they get
Oh,
to
yeah.
retire from the dry field.
Life.
work
That's
and all
true.
The rest
Yeah.
of
They
their
were. That's true. They were only
responsibilities.
from.
Well,
they still
clean,
had everything else.
scavenge on the. They
Yeah,
collect
they
seaweed.
work on the
yeah.
on the shore.
And they
swimming
also
and-
help watch. They also help train the young ones.
Mhm.
They may not go out and do the deep water wet work, but they might go into the cove and help train the
the
younger.
baby divers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So baby divers is not about their age; it's about their experience.
You'd be
There's-
like a woman in your 30s
And
and
be a
still
baby
be a
diver.
baby
And then
diver.
You
Yeah.
get to be a little diver,
Yeah.
and then you get to be a regular diver,
Yep.
and then you get to be a grandmother diver.
just before you retire at 55.
Yes.
Ish.
um,
It's weird. Okay, one of the things about that struck me too is there's this really deep connection with the water.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean these women can be up to they could be out there diving and only come in because they're in labor to
mhm.
They
deliver
don't
their
even come
children.
in
I know, me
Sometimes
too.
they don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes they
Deliver
go
in the
deliver
water.
on the
They
boat.
prefer
They got on the
deliver in
boat.
water.
Yeah, that's
They
right.
got on the boat, but if you think about okay, so when I was with my firstborn, I did aerobics until about 7 months, and then the last 2 months I did water aerobics, and I will tell you, you're very buoyant
Mhm.
in that water. You still work up a sweat in the pool,
Yeah.
but I can see the water on your joints is going to be a lot
She
better.
talks about how, because in her last pregnancy, their diving is banned, so she can't be in the water, and how much harder it is on her body to be pregnant on land,
like a
than
regular
she's-
people.
right? Than she's used to in the water. I loved when she gave birth to her first child, and they were diving, and she like popped out her baby and strapped it down on the boat on its little like bed, and then just went back in the water to finish her day's work. And she's like, "All right, we're going home with my new baby now." And that's when she was in Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Okay. So
leaving home
we're
water
and we're
work.
talking about leaving home water work that they got to do. Yeah, she didn't know she was pregnant when she left
Right.
for that. Let me go back before we get too far ahead.
That was one of the moments. There's like all these moments you could
So
like
many
feel
moments.
that there was something. This is gonna be something you come back to. Like I felt
Mhm.
that way.
Mhm.
The fact that Mija gave birth first, Oh wait, no, she didn't. Never mind. Remember, like we find out that why she had to marry.
Right at the very
Yeah.
end.
But we don't know early, so
Never mind.
Yeah.
I was having a thought I had, and then realized, oh, that's not true.
Okay.
But
Good try,
she
though.
thought she might be pregnant from that, right?
Right.
But then she wasn't.
So the story actually doesn't believe. It actually starts with young Suk as an old woman gathering algae on the beach, and I will say, the story goes back and forth between her young and her older, and
Yeah,
being.
you have two storylines where it's like she stayed.
It took me
the
a
one
while to
that's in
figure out that they're the
2008.
same person.
Well, they use the same name.
Yeah, but it took me a little bit, and then I realized
Like you
Yeah.
see her age, so from a child all the way up till she's a grandmother in one storyline, and then it jumps back and forth to like kind of like present day, not really, but 2008.
more modern.
Right. So you jump back to that, but then when you go back to like in the past, she's gotten a little bit older, so you really cover the majority of her lifespan.
So, a couple questions here. What secrets or clues about the past and the present are revealed in the scenes that take place in 2008? Why do we only understand the beginning of the novel after we're almost finishing it?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of knew, because at the beginning she's hostile toward this family that wants to talk to her, and you're curious as to why, and you don't even know at the beginning that it's Mija's family.
No,
but you
but
know it pretty quickly, though.
you
Right.
know that you do know pretty quickly, not right away, but you know that they're showing her they're trying to find information about a woman, and they're going to all the older women on the beach, showing her a picture, and she's like, no, I know nothing about that person. And you can sense that she does know, but there is clearly a hostility, and there's something bad happened in a break. And of course, yeah, there's a lot going on there.
I might cry right now while we talk about it. Like,
I love that teenager though. Her tenacity.
Yes, when she says, like, when she reveals how close she was to her grandmother, and there's hints even. I mean, Lisa C did. I mean, this is my first book I read by her. She did a very artful storytelling in how something about her tone that tells you when, like, that's interesting. You know, when she says, "I learned the Jeju dialect from my grandmother because that's how she preferred to talk to me."
The young girl, the young girl that is on the beach,
and then
with her mother.
Yeah, and then she starts talking about her family tree, that she never met her grandmother, and how her name's escaping me right now. How young Suk reacted to the mention of that person.
Yeah. Yeah, there's secrets that are being revealed in that end scene that are both, well, there's secrets that are secret to young Suk that she's learning, but then there's secrets that you as an author are also learning separate from her, because she knows that her daughter,
she knows who this girl is.
She knows this is her great granddaughter.
She recognizes her because she looks
but
like
we
her
didn't
friend.
know that was her great granddaughter.
No.
Not right away, but I kind of suspected that had to be a connection.
I really did just think for much of the book, I think that was the moment when I'm like, oh, there's a deeper connection here. Like, why would she react to this girl that Mija's son married?
Right.
And she was I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, it's interesting because the author leads you to believe, because they think that when they're friends, their firstborns are going to fall in love and marry each other.
Yeah.
So her oldest daughter and her son are going to end up together.
And that didn't happen.
It didn't happen, so you kind of forgot about it, and you're like, okay, well, then I guess they're not destined to be together.
Right.
And then near the end, you realize, oh, he actually married her younger daughter, and that's how they're connected.
And then when I realized that they married, so is it Chun-Li?
Who?
The youngest daughter?
Yes.
She comes home and she has this special announcement, and just
exactly what it is.
Just like Young Suk knew what it was, you know that she's announcing. As soon as she said, like, "Oh, I'm just grabbing something from Mija,"
right?
You know that they're together and that bond has been made. And that's when I realized that that's when you realize, right? And then I realized that her baby went away and she never
I know.
She never saw.
And she probably had that kind of breast cancer that kills you after you have a baby. Because I mean, like that's the unveiling of the story, and so like so much lost.
So
Yeah,
much because
so
of
much
I was gonna
lost.
say, so much half knowledge.
Yeah.
When you so many misconnections in communication because of not enough knowledge, but just enough for hurt feelings to
Yeah.
block communication.
Yeah.
It's like it does when we only our own perception without having context we can jump to conclusions, and that happens to this main character. She jumps to a conclusion without knowing why. She went through they went through various times of pain, and in the depth of her pain she could only see her pain, and had great expectations of her friend, not understanding the context of what happened. And so in her disappointment she became bitter, and that dictated the decisions she made over and over and over again, and she missed out until the very end almost.
Was she bitter? Because I
Parts
didn't
of her
get
parts of her
bitter.
I thought were bitter.
Wounded and resolved. Like those are the two things. Like she resolved to just let them be. Like they resolved to let them go to America and not be a part of their lives.
I'm thinking about the bitterness toward
Toward
Mija. Toward
Yeah.
Mija. So one of the things you talked about earlier, and I think this goes out when Young Suk and Mija are 15. Young Suk's mother says to them, "You are like sisters, and I expect you to take care of each other today and every day, as those tied by blood would do." So how are these words of warning? The friendship between Young Suk and Mija is just one of many examples of powerful female relationships in the novel. Discuss the ways in which female relationships are depicted and the important role they play on Jeju. Because I'm thinking about the sisters, the two
Kong sisters.
from which I kept remembering because you're introduced to them actually as old women.
Yeah,
on the
they're
beach.
at the beach with her at the day too.
But they're like they're practically family. But they had their own kind of a little bit of rivalry, kind of falling out, difficulties also, but clearly they resolved it because they're on the beach together as older women.
And she goes to talk to, I don't remember which one because their names sounded so familiar.
The
one who lost her daughter, and she's like, "How did you ever forgive your sister for it?" And she was like, "What else was I gonna do? She's my sister. I had to. It was hard, but because she's my sister." And then I was thinking about that in the context of Mija and Youngsuk, because they said themselves they're closer than sisters.
Yes, but maybe not, because the ones who were sisters by blood, they still had a different connection than Misuk and Mijang and Youngsuk, because
that's their friend name.
Misuk. That's right. Yeah, like
so until they're like married women, they're Misuk. I hope that's not anything rude.
But there was some other other female relationships. I think of their mothers, like Mijang's no, I guess Mijang was raised by her aunt, right?
Her aunt and uncle.
Mija. I'm mixing them up.
You're trying out different couple names.
That's
I get
right.
it.
Brangelina.
Yeah. Well, and then like the 180-degree flip when she is. I mean, first of all, how do you survive
after what she went through?
Like I mourned that for about a week after experiencing that part of the book. And what I'm talking about is it the April,
the 4-3 incident?
Yeah, the 4-3 incident.
That was and I looked that up historically. That was a real thing.
This
that
book
happened.
is very good.
It's very well
lining
up
well.
These are real places, real events that happened. Yeah. Even if the characters,
including the one body thing I wanted to bring up, because I got very excited. I'm going off topic. I'm sorry. I got very excited when we were back in the
Vladivostok.
Thank you. Because we were just there.
Oh,
in Oksana Behave.
Oh yeah, that's so funny. I didn't think of that.
So I had to look it up, and I'm like, because we've been there twice, like we
Right.
should know where we've been. It's a tiny little blip in huge Russia, and then to have it connect in this book too, I
That's
wanted
so
to
funny.
look up. So then I'm like, oh, what's Jeju like because I wanted to see what their geographic
Mhm,
relationship
mhm.
was. And so when you Google Jeju Island,
Mhm.
if you want to do that right now,
Okay.
you get to see pictures, right? I love traveling via
Mhm.
Google because that's what we can
It
do,
looks like a beautiful place.
right? So they have. Do you see the sculptures yet?
This one. I see this one.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
I guess I got a different Google result. Maybe do it on this computer.
Okay.
So anyway, there is this island. There's a museum because she's talking about how she doesn't want to go anywhere with the Kong sisters later, and they talk about the Museum of Human Sexuality, and that is one of the first things I got when I Googled Jeju Island.
Was what?
There's this beautiful sculpture garden with these very...
Oh, they did talk about the sculpture garden in the book.
Yeah, with these very explicit but gorgeous.
My.
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay, yes, I did see that.
I gotta see
But
this.
it came up like right away for me.
No, I had to Google a little harder to find the things that I'm looking for.
I used the work computer just so you guys know.
They're
kind of holding him in place.
Oh, I like that one.
There's a lot going on. I gotta close this tab.
So
what were you talking about
go
before
ahead
this?
and Google that, guys. It's super cool. It's mentioned in the book, but Lisa C did a great job of giving it place. Yeah, for example.
Yes.
And so when she depicts what happens to her family and her community, I don't know how a person survives that.
Yeah.
And these things happen throughout human history over and over again. And the atrocities we visit on each other terrify me. And to hear such a vivid description of it.
It was really hard to... I listened to it on Audible, so it was hard to listen to.
Yeah. I was weeping.
I was yelling in my car. I was like, what the hell, book? Why are you doing this to me? I was already kind of... So this is my one critique of the book. I was a little frustrated by the book because I understand why, but it got so into the aspects of the war that I felt a little bogged down in the center of the book.
True. Yeah.
So at that point, I was already kind of like this... Like, it was a lot that was already happening. And then that was sort of like the culmination of it all.
That led to it. Which,
so by then I was already frustrated and upset. And then that happened. And I was like, I can't listen to this book anymore.
But
it
gives you a glimpse of the depth of they're already carrying so much fear and pain and stress. And then it keeps piling on and the people that are committing this, that the fact that they're capable of that,
it's their own countrymen.
Their own. I mean, that's the thing they even said over and over again.
America played in it of condoning it and letting it happen.
Oh, it made me so angry. Their own. They're people doing it to them.
She says other Koreans would never do this to each other.
Yeah.
And it something I was thinking about, because I love that this book taught me so much about Korea and the history of Korea in the 20th century. Because I will say I was ignorant and I need to learn more. I mean, I have a somewhat understanding of what goes on now, but how did we get here?
Right.
So I, just like a little aside, I was thinking about this girl a lot. And when I worked for the bank, we were all in banker training together, and you sat together kind of like in school where you had 4 desks together or something like that. That's how I remember it. And, someone at the table, she's like, oh yeah, my family immigrated from Korea. I came here when I was a child. And someone at the table asked her, oh, where are you from, North or South Korea? And I knew not to ask that because, like,
you don't come from North Korea.
Well, I'm like, if her family escaped North Korea, you're casually asking her about that?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
That's like saying, how'd you get away from Auschwitz?
Yeah,
I mean, seriously, it's a bad question.
Which someone will maybe tell you, but you better be ready.
You
better be ready. That's not casual.
That's not a casual conversation that you just bring around. It's like, it's one thing.
Yeah, it's not casual get to know you as colleagues conversation at a training where you may never see the person again.
It's like, that's way too personal
So this
question.
wonderful woman, so kind, says, you don't ask a Korean where they're from because Koreans only see one Korea. And I've always thought about that, like in my like very low understanding of what makes Korea tick. And I think about it when I hear about the atrocities and the trouble that North Korea has, that how their countrymen would probably just desperately want to relieve them of that. I mean, I'm putting a lot on it that I'm just making up. But I think about that woman saying that and having the willingness to share that with this table of basic strangers. And I kept thinking about her while I was reading this, like as we get to the point where Korea gets divided.
When I worked at a bank, I worked with a gal who was Korean. And I thought of her during this too, because I mean, I knew her in the 80s and it was obvious her experience was also very different, but her parents would have come from that same time. She was born
she'd be
here.
A contemporary.
Her parents would have been
Young Suk,
Yeah,
probably.
She's more my age or slightly.
I mean, no, her parents.
Her parents would have been, yeah. And we would go to dinner sometimes in Koreatown, but it made me think of how much we don't know, because you know what? It's not our business unless they share that with us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thought that was a great generosity for her to share that
something
with us.
You mentioned about one thing you're going to find within all of the Lisa C. movie books is they're so well researched, and you're going to learn more and more about the culture. She goes very in depth, and you learn so much about the culture from the perspective of someone who knows the culture, not an American or not an outsider.
Yeah,
you learn something from that culture. I always learn.
I thought I wanted to reread this book, and I still do. I think what I want to do is share this book now. Kind of probably maybe that's what Carol was feeling when she turned us all onto it.
Book.
So I already have someone who I'm gonna lend this book to, but I think I really just want to read more Lisa C.
Yeah,
it's both a lot of. She teaches you a lot, like you were saying, Karin, about the culture, but also like what Anne was saying about the history, because I also was ignorant about the history of Korea. And it was fascinating to see during that time period how the division came to be. And I just learned so much from this book that I wasn't expecting to. You don't expect to learn a lot when you're reading a novel. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
We've got more questions about the book, but I do want to recommend Shanghai Girls, because Shanghai being a different culture of China than other parts of China, and you learn. Okay, I've always heard about Ellis Island. I didn't know about Angel Island in San Francisco, and it talks about Angel Island in San Francisco was basically like a concentration camp until people did go out, but it was a huge people could be stuck there for more than a year. They could be stuck on that island like prisoners. So, and the tea girl of Hummingbird Lane, I learned about even tea culture. Had no idea that, like when we see tea in a tea bag, that's like nothing. It's packed in hard condensed cakes, and there's a rich, it's very healthy. There's a culture. So there's so much you can learn from Lisa C. Another question here. Young Suk's mother recites a traditional Henyo aphorism. Every woman who enters the sea carries a coffin on her back, which is such a heavy thing to think about. But
it's true.
It's one of the things they say. You are not afraid of death so much because this is what you are trained, that this is a possibility. This is part of your culture. But she also says that the sea is like a mother. And then later in page 71, grandmother says the ocean is better than your natal mother because the sea is forever. How do these contradictory ideas play out in the novel? What do they say about the dangerous work of the Henyo?
Oh, I don't know if they contradict. I mean, it's the truth.
I don't think they contradict. I think
of mother-daughter relationships, of friendships. Like, I mean, those things play out in the maternal and the friendship in this, because like the
it's
friendship,
not without pain, but it's there. But it doesn't stop.
Dies. Her family dies. Her mother dies. Her children die. Like,
But the sea is comfort.
Right.
Even in her old age, when her limbs get tired, she goes into the sea and it takes the weight off.
Right.
There is a soothingness. There's a connection to it.
Her mother died, but the sea remains, you know? Like,
Or I think about, okay, but where they say the coffin, I think about when, is it her daughter that goes out with and is because when they go into certain areas, they do the buddy system.
With
So
Monsoon.
with not knowing that the girl went down and then was never seen again.
Mm-hmm.
And when they
do you
look
think
for
she was
her,
pregnant?
No, I don't think she was.
I thought she was.
I don't know.
I don't
But
know.
I
I mean, I think that young man was misjudged. Like,
Yes.
young Sook
Yeah.
misjudged him.
But I don't think that it was a suicide. I think it was just one of the tragic accidents of the sea. Is that when they try to find, and there's that teaching moment too where she brings her daughter, she goes down with her daughter, and
Mm-hmm.
because there's a moment where her daughter is just feeling the pain of the confusion, not knowing what could happen, and would not, that until she had gotten some of that question answered, she wasn't going to leave.
Yeah.
She was going to always wonder and be drawn to that, and she wouldn't really be able to move forward with her life or with anything. But when she almost gets swept away in that underwater current, you could see that, wow, there's just no way that they. And I think of the mother, your daughter's just there and then she's gone, and there's no body, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Don't they have a ceremony too also when someone dies about how they return them to the sea? But there's something that they do to appease the ocean
Mm-hmm.
god or goddess, so
But
that
to
she
let
doesn't.
the spirit speak, so she's not a hungry ghost.
So she's not a hungry ghost.
I don't know if that was
I
exactly
think-
the intention, but
Well, they didn't find Monsoon's body ever, so
Mhm.
they couldn't perform the like funeral ritual for her. So she
Yeah.
was a hungry ghost, whereas like her mother wasn't, because they had her body and could do the
Mhm.
but that
the funeral
that
rites for her.
Yeah, but that there is something about that ritual that is supposed to do something. Let the spirits speak.
Well, yeah, because they speak through Shaman Kim.
I love that shaman. She's so wise. Some of it was her, and some of it was the I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Anyway,
This book is so good.
okay.
There's so much to unpack. Like the whole, where did the Heidi books come from?
Yeah, they didn't really touch on that because
wanna
they said
Google
there
that.
was
It's-
Swiss influence, right?
Yeah.
But
Well-
then I thought I was expecting to learn more about that or for that to come into play. But
Well, they said that that came from a box of Heidi books being distributed on the island, and then no one never knew where they came from.
Huh.
And that's where our girl Clara gets her name.
Oh yeah.
yeah, that was interesting. I thought that that was gonna come back, but yeah, it was. I like that they had that to share, that they all, and the daughter could read and she couldn't, so she would read to her mom the story of Heidi, and it made me want to read Heidi because I've never read it. But
Yes. I hope this comes out right. I appreciated the portrayal of these characters who are genius at what they do.
Mhm.
And the reminder that just like literacy and book learning are not always a
Right.
valuable thing.
right, she was able to provide for her family and be a strong, independent provider, and she never learned how to read even as an older woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The realization that the iPod was not playing music, and then
Yeah.
it was just playing her Mija testimonial.
But you
and her
don't know that until
interview.
later. Yeah.
Oh,
That,
Yeah.
And that young Sook gets that chance to hear her friends explain.
Is Mija still alive?
No.
Did they say when she passed away?
Toward
It's
the
at
very end.
Yeah.
I didn't remember hearing that, and I wondered.
I thought
Maybe
she
missed
died.
it.
She died of cancer. I thought.
No,
Or
her
was the daughter?
grandmother did.
Yeah.
Clara's
Chun-Li died.
right. I must have just missed it.
All of it wraps up kind of like in a whirlwind almost.
Right.
Little bit.
It all kind of happens real quickly, and I couldn't remember if maybe it was mentioned before or if I just was expecting Mija to show up at the end and she didn't, and I don't know.
I appreciated that Clara and her mother were so ready to meet Young Suk where she was.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wonder if Clara's mother didn't have like a little, was it Janet is her name?
Yeah.
That wouldn't you feel this like loss or jealousy? Because this is her other grandmother.
Right.
And and
Yeah.
she's getting to meet her other grandmother. And all these years lost. And
Yeah,
she
that was
would
an
go
interesting...
to, like, when Clara points, oh, you went to LA?
Right.
You
And
you
she
used
says
to come
even
to
at the
LA?
end, she's like, I went to LA before to visit my family, and I could have driven by their house. I could have looked them up, and I didn't. You know? Yeah. It must be
Ouch.
that...
Yeah.
I was thinking a lot about Janet and Clara and how strong of characters they ended up being. And like you said, they were so willing to meet her where she was. They were super restrained about it. They weren't angry at her, which was interesting because it would be hard not to be, but because of Mija's perspective, she says, like, I was the bad person. It's not Young Suk's fault that this happened. You know, I just pray that she can forgive me. So having that perspective from her grandmother, I don't know, it was interesting that the characters that they ended up being, even though you don't hardly know anything about them.
Yeah. I guess we kind of get to know them through their actions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what drove them to be there, their willingness to carry this message from Mija to her.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they came for the opening of the museum, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of which I think both Mija and my brains Young Suk were both pictured there, partly because, and I want to bring this up, the visit of the scientist to the island,
Which is real, because when that's another like historical point. Because when I was telling Kevin what I was reading, he was like, "Oh yeah, didn't they study them? They have like a special enzyme, and that's what blah 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 blah." I'm like, "Yeah, that's them."
It says here, at first it would seem that the visit of the island was something of a digression, but what important consequences does the visit have for Young Suk and the other Henyo? I think it's sort of, they knew that it's almost like they knew that what they did was different from, because not every woman on that island can be a Henyo. They have to, even the progression from baby diver to young diver, not everybody makes it out of baby diver. That's why they're saying you may start off as a teenager as a baby diver. You may spend your whole life as a baby diver and never grow beyond that. But then there's that thing, that comparison with the remember they had regular women and they had the Henyo, and they were trying to compare to see what was different. There was one point where I lost my train of thought. Someone else pick it up. I'll say something.
Well, I'm gonna change direction a little bit because I'm flipping through the book trying to find. They say she's dead somewhere.
Okay.
And maybe it's just that they are always talking about her in the past tense. Maybe it doesn't say.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it said explicitly or.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just maybe it's inferred.
I actually thought that they did talk about.
They might. I just can't find it yet. But
Misha being dead, because there was a. I felt like when the young gal was on the beach talking to Young Suk, that when all is being revealed, that pretty much any chance of her reconciling was long gone, and when she hears the sacrifices that Young Suk really did make on her behalf, that her chance, I just felt grieved that she finally sees. She didn't know up to this point the depth of what she really lost. But I think I felt heartbreak that all these years, all these decades, she could have had that friendship, and the real, the grief of whatever that word is,
yeah. It was interesting to learn from Mija's perspective her take on the incident and what happened afterwards, and how she made sacrifices for Young Suk that she didn't even know about, and she makes good points, because Young Suk's upset because she's like, well, why didn't you help us that day? her husband, her sister-in-law, her son all died, and she thinks that Mija could have done something about it, right? And Mija says, I couldn't have done, well, initially she's like, I couldn't have helped you, and she's upset about it, but later it's revealed that she says she didn't take her family because she didn't want to subject them to being raised by her husband, who was abusive, and she's like, and Clara says, like, it's better to be beaten than to be dead. Like, I'd rather live with an abusive parent than to, not live at all. And Mija admits that she was wrong in thinking that, but at the time she's like, everything happened so quickly. What was I supposed to do? So her hearing that perspective from her, because I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
Because I considered her perspective in that, like, well, what was she supposed to do? She couldn't have done anything, even if, like, Young-suk was being a little, like, she had too much of an expectation of her.
Right. She had a very big expectation. She had no idea what was really going on.
And if she was in that same situation, how she would have reacted.
Right.
And Misha's husband would never have really taken them.
I think
anyway,
that no, that's not true. That's why she limps. He beat her and broke her leg because he would have, because he owed them so much for his honor.
Oh,
not for any nicety, but because for his honor and his what do you call it?
But he would have eventually beat on them too.
Oh
yeah.
But
Mija is right, but except for the fact that he probably
to
would have
uphold
taken
his
them,
own honor, and
he probably would have stopped it all. Actually,
yeah.
If he may have had that in his
did
power.
he really have that power? Because
He might
I
have.
thought that I felt like he was kind of kowtowing to that there were authorities there.
I
that
agree.
He had to. I don't know that he had the
when
authority
he
as they
showed
thought.
up and was trying to defuse it to get his wife. I felt that he might not have the authority that Young-suk thought he has.
Yeah,
right.
Because I agree with you. I totally think that he might not have been able to stop it, but that's why he beat her, and that's why she left.
Yeah, it was interesting when they talked about that, because initially I was like, he was mad that Mija didn't say anything, and I was like, well, does that mean that he's upset that his friends died? But then I was like, well, I guess not, because then later on they talk about how it was all just because of his reputation, that he didn't want to be seen as, whatever, and that's why he was upset. But for like a split second I thought, well, maybe there's a redeeming quality about what's his name, but there was not.
No, I think
he was an ass.
I think Mija guarding them was not wrong. I think she was absolutely right about that.
But there was no way she could say that.
No.
There's no.
I mean, I wonder how long it even took her to have words for that.
Right.
Because I'm sure it was like a gut reaction, maybe. While I was flipping though, I came across this part that I loved. When Clara says, it follows along. Halmang Mija always said, "You called her Halmang Mija?" Just hearing her name that way leaves Young-suk unaccountably shaken. I usually called her Granny, but she preferred Halmang, which that's grandmother and goddess.
And goddess, yeah.
Which I want to be called goddess. Okay, future grandchildren, now you know. But I think that line might have had a little more effect on the reader if they'd been using it a little bit more.
Yeah.
It was a purposeful substitution to not. But it did, nonetheless, it struck a chord of like, how weird would it be to hear that is the respect that Mija eventually demanded for herself.
Right, yeah, that's interesting that she preferred that.
Yeah, because Young-suk still sees her as what she did when she last knew her.
And Mija doesn't see herself in that high of regard, because she talks about how she was a bad person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, to the end. But for her to prefer Halmang, that has to
because I also think that she feels the guilt of not speaking up, that she might feel the weight of the deaths of her friend's family for the rest of her life, and that makes her a bad person.
Well, like Young-suk felt Yuri's accident forever, and the guilt of her own mother's accident. Which, I mean, can you put that on? I had this like moment of, Young-suk, what are you doing going up? Like, you told us that's not how you get an abalone.
Yeah,
you just killed your mom.
So,
which is not true, because her mother knew better than to do what she did too.
There was another really neat thing that went throughout like a thread that went along throughout the book. long before the days of creative memories and photo albums, the way that they made memorable
Oh,
moments
yes.
was with rubbings.
I love that.
They when they did away from home work together, and they went in and they went to a really fancy park. They did a rubbing of like the stone, like a stone, or the etching of a hotel. You know,
the bathroom sign.
the
'cause they
bathroom
didn't know what it
sign
said.
because they didn't know what it said. So they,
Oh, the bathroom sign was in Jeju. Not
no,
Jeju.
that was in
Jeju
Vladivostok.
City. Oh, are you sure?
Oh no,
That-
no. That was
that
the day
was-
of the Henya March. You're right. You're right.
and the Henya
because they were
March.
like they
Oh,
still had that
yeah.
little girl naivete to them.
Right.
That's why it just stuck out. But they did still, nonetheless, same things in Vladivostok, and I
Yes.
agree.
Yeah.
That was just such a cool thing to do.
Because throughout your life, I mean,
But
they're
then
they're
when
small
she gets them back.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna weep.
Tell me, I forgot because it's
Okay,
read that part about when she gets them back.
I don't remember exactly if it's like if she's thumbing through them when, because there's an envelope that Clara gives her that has
Yeah,
all the
that
She's
has
looking
them.
through. I just listened. I finished listening to it
Oh,
today.
she was putting
So
them in the
she's-
letters, right?
She's looking through all the letters.
Yeah.
By herself. She goes to her house, she gets the letters, she goes to the beach, she
Oh,
sits
that's
down
right.
and opens them all. And she's like, I don't know why Mija thinks I can read this because I can't read. So she opens the letters, and in each letter there's also a rubbing included.
Mhm.
So, and it starts from like their very first one in the first letter that they send her. And then in each subsequent letter she says she gets 2 a year. Then she includes more and more rubbings for her to open. And that's when
she gets
Clara
Janet's foot.
yeah. That's when Clara and Janet show up to like talk to her again, and that's
Oh,
when she
That
finally.
it's true that there's
Also-
these rubbings of moments that she would have that she
Yeah.
missed,
Yeah.
but
She
her
was
friend loved her
Still
so much
sharing
she
after all
still
that
made sure
injury
I know.
and
that-
that separation
that
Oh.
she. I know. Oop, okay, I'm getting cheery. But that she cared so much that she preserved these moments for her friend with the hopes that someday
She
they would be
open.
reconciled.
Yeah.
But she loved this so much for her friend, even if her friend was angry at her for the rest of their
Right.
lives, that she was going to look out for her because she had the position of being able to
Yep.
have those
Like
share those
her-
moments.
Like Young Suk tending to her house and caring for
Oh.
her house,
Uh-huh.
not knowing why she was driven to do it.
Right.
It's that caretaking
I also think there was
better than family,
because while she was angry at her friend, there was that part of her that missed and
She's-
she wasn't ready to let go
She
of that
says
connection.
She doesn't know why she was doing it, but she was going to be ready for Mija when she showed up. And she's like, I don't even
But
know
then
what that
she
means.
wasn't. Yeah,
She's
and
like,
she
I don't know what
wasn't.
it means to be ready for her because then she does, and she's like, I've been taking care of your house. I don't know why. And Mija's like, thank you, I appreciate it.
because she was too mad to say so, or to maybe she couldn't even articulate it.
Right. I
Right.
mean,
Every
some
time she-
feelings don't
Every
have
time
words.
she went there was like this connection to her friend.
Mm-hmm.
Her anger kept her from really reaching out, but she could never fully give it up
Thin.
because
Right.
they were thicker than.
Well, thin line between love and hate, right?
Yeah, it's true.
The people you feel the deepest for, you can go on either side of that razor. While I was in that section going, but trying to find where they acknowledge that Mija has died, I noticed the language changes in the last 2008 section. She mostly refers to them as Mija's daughter and Mija's granddaughter.
Mm.
And then in that last moment, she talks of them, like she says Jana and Clara.
You know, I
like,
was-
that language changed.
I was
So
interested
artful.
in why, which I don't understand why, in the parts of the book that are of the past and telling Young Suk's story growing up, they're from her perspective, their first person perspective. But then in all the passages in 2008, they say it's like a third person perspective, and Young Suk did this and Young Suk did that, and she went here and she did that. And I'm curious as to why you guys thought there was a difference. Because it would have been easy to tell the story a bit like, oh, I went to the museum opening and I met Clara at the beach and I did this and that. But it's told from a
Yeah,
different
that was an
perspective.
interesting voice change as we shifted forward and back. I wonder if because of the importance of point of view and
Mhm.
only having a limited, like we as the reader have, when we're in her story, we have the same limited point of view as she has.
We only have her version of the story, really.
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
the end.
And so
When
in the present,
yeah.
we get a global view
Right.
Yeah.
of the full story. So I wonder if that's to amplify that we like that point of view and only seeing it through young Sook's eyes.
Yeah, because she's like an untrustworthy like narrator, right?
Yeah.
Because you're only hearing about it from her perspective and her tainted point of view. Yeah.
For a tainted point of view, I did think she was giving, like, she didn't always act in her own self-interest.
No.
Like, she didn't she didn't spread the rumors about Mija's son. Like, she kept that to herself, you know, even if it was kind of the common thought, she did not talk out of turn about it. So she could have lit it on fire.
Right.
But as angry as she was, she still loved her friend.
Yeah, that loyalty.
There's that bond that also there's a bond that Henyo have. You notice the Henyo don't really turn on other Henyo, except I thought there was one moment when no, I can't think of that. I thought it was really even going back into the past a little bit more. I really love the connection that she had with her mother-in-law.
Yeah.
That was an interesting.
It was interesting because
it was relationship.
It was because in the beginning I think her mother-in-law really doesn't like her.
Right.
I think it's exemplar of mothers-in-law.
Right.
But something happened because her mother-in-law and her mother were best friends. So she didn't just lose it wasn't just that she lost her mother. Her mother-in-law also lost her best friend.
Right.
And there was that loss that brought them together. And there was things that she did with her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law took her side that I mean, her mother-in-law tried to train her to be the next leader because her mother had been the leader.
I thought
and
that
really
was
try to present her
like that turn of tide. Which maybe, I mean, like, you don't know how your mother-in-law feels about you,
right?
Until you kind of know, you know.
Yeah.
But her mother-in-law also loved her mother so much that she was trying to honor what her best friend's wishes would have been. She's like, she knew that she said, I know your mother would have wanted you to be to be this leader. She had trained her from early. She gave her experiences earlier than most girls her age.
You have to know that Young Sook was not necessarily wrong about, and I was looking, I can't remember how, like, I loved listening to this because the pronunciations were figured out for me.
Yes.
But I was just, it's like, I looked up, it's Dosa.
Tosang?
Thank you.
Tosang?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I looked at it, I'm like, I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
Now.
I have the like characters in front of me. I'm like, I don't know who that person is. And I was like, oh no, that's Tosang.
Yes.
Because it doesn't sound like a D. It sounds like a T.
Yeah.
And some of the
I didn't read it at all, which I was really grateful for because I would have been bogged down in like proper nouns, like names of places, and wanting to be able to make sure I'm pronouncing them correctly in my own brain. So
I mostly listened, and then sometimes, like, some of the sections I would go back and read, which was delightful. I felt like a little kid in front of the stereo where you have your I forget, they were a brand name. It was like Read and Listen or something,
right?
And then
he goes,
turn the tape,
turn the page,
and then turn the tape now.
Yep.
Or change the record. We had some that were records.
Oh yeah.
And that was kind of fun. Because some words I have to see to learn. Maybe not this time. So it just undid the learning. But Tosang probably did have those hostilities. I don't think Young Sook was imagining that. Like, her daughter got herself in trouble.
Right.
But Young Sook was there for it. Young Sook's mother got herself in trouble.
Right.
But she was there for it. And for how little power she had in each of those situations, there's still that, like, accusatory wondering of, like, how could you have stopped that, you know?
Right.
I don't think she imagined those things, but
she does tell her later, like, Tosang tells her, like, straight up, it's like, I don't blame you for what happened to Yuri, and I don't blame you for what happened to your mother, because she should have known better.
But that's a long time coming.
No, I know it's pretty far into the book that does happen.
And okay, the moment I treasure from that relationship is when Young Sook stumbles into their house in the night.
Right,
and
after
they have
she's
that wordless
escaped.
greeting, and she feels her swelling belly, and they have that connection that's going to go on.
Yeah.
Because is it John Boo is her husband. What's her husband's name?
Chunbu.
He sounded lovely.
I know. I
in
loved
a world
him.
of arranged marriages, granted they knew each other their whole lives, so like that put an interesting light on well-arranged arranged marriages. Like
it was interesting because when I don't remember his name, but oh my gosh,
what was
Mija's husband?
Soon is he Sung
Moon?
Yeah,
something like that.
Look.
Anyway, when he shows up and you're hearing it from her perspective, right? And she thinks like, oh, he's so handsome, he's so nice. I want him. I'm sad that I'm not marrying him, and she's jealous of Mija. And then so you're sort of tainted into when she does get matched up with Chunbu, you feel the same way where you're like, well, okay, I hope he's good. Yeah. But then he's like so nice to her. Best. I loved him. I loved their relationship because you could tell how much they love each other.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Young Suk's husband.
Yes.
They just made a beautiful family together. Yeah. Like I love describing like he's trying to learn English and the kids are like na we know it, and she's even like, oh, this is easy.
And she's worried about how she thinks that like he's gonna know he's so much more educated and well educated than her. But he tells her like, yeah, but like you provide for our family. Like they're such good partners.
Yeah,
and he's
perfect, good mirrors for each other.
Yeah. When she's told you are perfectly matched, and at first she's very resentful, and she says, "Go down," and the first person that you see that gets off the boat, that's and when she sees him, she's like,
"No." That's my friend's brother. I'd known him since he was a kid.
But as their relation, as that to me, it's like, wow, the person you were matched with, the person who cared so much about you, knew who you were and knew what your needs would be, and that to me, getting paired with that how they were paired showed such great love. Like she really was understood. Like it's almost like you want to say she got you. She really did get you.
I felt bad for Mija in that
when her real story came out.
Well, yes, but not
that broke my heart
because Young Suk's mother wasn't there. If Young Suk's mother, I think, had been around, she wouldn't have been paired with. What's his name?
Yeah, Son.
But grandmother was in charge, and grandmother never liked Mija.
Nope.
So she thought that the match was perfect.
Yep, she got what she deserved. She knowingly.
Exactly. She knew because Mija came to her and said,
yes.
"This happened to me," and she's like, "You got to marry him."
Yep.
And yeah, that was hard to listen to because you had respect for her grandmother because of how much Young Suk loved her and talked about her, but that was hard.
Yep.
And then
it's the shortcomings of even the best people.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't
like our narrator.
Yeah,
she's good people. Just
everybody's flawed.
Yep.
But then later when you find out that Mija, she's with child, but not by her own fault.
But she wasn't with child.
She wasn't. That's where I was tripping.
She
on
wasn't.
Myself.
Wait.
She wasn't pregnant when she got married.
She thought she might be. And that the only way to solve it.
The problem was there was a chance that she could have been pregnant. Yeah. So that's why they had to get married right away.
And then what a disappointment she was.
But it wasn't like she flirted. It's because he forced himself
on
her.
No, he raped her. Clara calls it. She's like, he raped you, Grandma.
Yeah.
But when I think of
but the fact that she went to Young Suk's grandmother and told her that, and she's like, well, you gotta marry him. Like, if her mom would have been there, it would have not.
She always talked about how very petty. She loved her grandma, but how very petty her grandma was.
You're right. I think you're right. I don't think that would have happened because Young Suk's mother, like, really,
she was an advocate.
Took her as her daughter.
Yes,
like took her under her.
She
care.
really kind of advocated for her and really. Yeah, she mothered her as if it was.
She saw a motherless child, and which God bless her,
because her aunt and uncle were useless, and in spite of that, she still took care of her aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
When I think of Young Suk, how jealous she was, not understand because of her lack of understanding. I really think that right there. That's where things started to turn, was her own petty jealousy born out of ignorance because her friend could not didn't even have time to say, this is what happened to me. He's not that great.
So I'm feeling like a little, like I have a shortcoming here that I keep calling her Young Suk's mother.
Yeah, what is her name?
Mother?
No, she has a name.
I'm sure she does, but like she gets referred to because it's Young Six's voice. It's Mother.
She was like the chief.
I'll find
she
it.
was the chief of the Henyo.
Yeah, I'm sure that somebody says it
early on. Yeah.
But it's.
I read it earlier when I was looking through.
It's Mother
something.
in all the text.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other questions, but they're not as interesting, so I didn't.
Well, we're having such a good organic conversation. You chose good questions that you did share. Boltic is not spelled the way I thought it would be.
What is?
I really thought it was with a P.
Oh.
The name of their beach shelter,
whatever. Yeah. I didn't read any of it, so after I listened to all of it, and now I'm like looking up information about it. I'm like, that's not how I thought that was going to be spelled. That's not how I thought that was going to be spelled. But yeah.
And another thing I thought was interesting for it to be minimized is she never names her siblings. Little sister, and not much mention of her, and brother one, and first brother, second brother, third brother, and fourth brother.
Yeah, I like that.
She bounced fourth brother on her hip. We don't know their names.
Yeah, that's interesting. That wasn't really important.
I think Kim Sun-sil.
Sun-sil. Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds right.
Sun-sil. Yeah.
So
it's not until they're at her funeral.
Oh.
Help me understand this one. Young Suk's mother recites the aphorism, if you plant red beans, then you will harvest red beans.
Oh, you get what you give.
Junbu repeats the phrase on page 199, although I have no idea because on the Kindle version they don't have pages.
Well, that's when he's talking about
how are
sending
these
the
two
kids.
characters interpret the same? Her mother is interpreting it one way. Is Junbu interpreting the same or different?
I think so. I don't know. I don't remember Mother saying it the first time, but I remember
it would be
Junbu
on page
saying
39.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, Junbu's talking about how he wants to raise his children educated and he wants them to go to school.
Yeah.
And
to be more than red beans.
Well, if you plant that in them, if you intend that for them, then they're going to grow up and they're going to, fulfill that. So,
I love, though, that even though she wasn't as educated, she really...
she wasn't an advocate for her children getting education in the beginning, though.
Died.
No, I mean, after he died, she sought to honor that, but then...
She's like, that's not real, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But then...
You dreamer, you.
But then I think part of her sort of regrets it because, like, her daughter is able to have opportunities that no one else could have, but it draws her daughter into a world beyond her.
Well, it's that growing pain of like you want for your children to have a better experience in this world than you had.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's this like little bit of jealousy that they get to do that. Like, so, like it's a jealousy, it's a fear of letting them out into the world.
Right. You want them to fly away, but not too far away.
Right. Like when Alexander was little, I wanted him just an arm's distance. Like, you can go do your own thing, but if I can't reach out and grab your collar, then you've gone too far. I got over that. But I remember thinking about that. Like, how far away can he wander? If I can reach him, he's fine.
Yeah.
Did you get to page 39?
Yes. This is good.
Okay.
Defiance skittered across Mija's features. My father was not a traitor. He worked for the Japanese in Jeju City. But that doesn't mean... Mother cut her off to recite a familiar aphorism. If you plant red beans, then you will harvest red beans. This meant that a child's character and behavior came from what the parents planted. No one likes a collaborator, she said matter-of-factly. The people in the 7 villages of Hado were ashamed when your mother and father chose that life.
That's interesting because I was thinking about that, but that's like when they first meet her.
Yeah.
And her mother changes her perspective on her pretty quickly. Whereas at first she doesn't trust her, but then she's like, okay, but you're like a daughter to me. Whereas that perspective,
might have, just been feeling sad for a hungry child,
right?
And then it grew to something
right.
better.
But that perspective of like your parents were Japanese collaborators, you're a Japanese collaborator. In my mind, that seems more grandma to me than mom.
Well. How much do we have to try to unlearn
wait. There's a red bean experience there.
Yeah.
Her mother was trained by her
that bias.
by her mother.
And so on. And yet Sun-sil had the strength of character to make her own decisions about how to treat this poor child. I mean, I
I
kind
think
of
it's
like it
also
because
some,
I
as she
love how
got,
Junbu uses it. Like,
Yeah.
I like
Right.
how Junbu uses it in a more modern, like, okay, well, if you're going to use that logic on me, what do you want for these kids?
Right.
It's a perfect, like, husband-wife
Can I
fight.
That's so funny.
Don't confuse me with the facts. You can use these words against me later. Where have we heard that recently?
Or doing that, I want to talk just briefly about, they talked about Confucianism is traditionally played a lesser role on Jeju than elsewhere in Korea. And part of me, I don't fully understand Confucianism other than it's more mainland China.
Well, it's
And
I don't think it. I
and
don't
it's
think
different
it's
from the
unique.
shamanism, because I know that shamanism was outlawed at some
Yeah.
point. But in the smaller villages, they're going to do what they're going to do and let the outside
Right.
world do what it's
They
going to
have
do.
less outside influence.
But it has some practical the shamanism has practical applications for the Henyo. It says, do the traditions and rituals help the Henyo conquer the fear and anxieties they have about the dangerous work they do? Or does it bring comfort during illness, death, and other tragedies? Does young Suk ever question her beliefs, and why?
Yeah, I think that that having a shaman to speak for you to, the dragon sea god, who will either bless you or, whatever, when you're in the sea, it's the perspective that you have somebody else to blame if something does go wrong. And she does question her faith at the end when she talks about, like, well, okay, when you threw the rice cake at the tree and it stuck and that meant that I was going to have good luck in my marriage, like, what was that a lie? Because I had a horrible,
Because everything about that
everything
was
ended
awful.
horribly for me,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And yet did it.
Right. She says,
Yeah.
I've questioned this my whole life. Like, I believe, in fate and in, because I think she's talking to her daughter about Wansoon, where it's like, she had a good fortune. Like, why did that happen? And she's like, I don't know, but I've questioned that myself, but
and then there was the one gal who got a bad fortune and her life ended up being okay.
Right.
I think that, like, mentioning the religious restrictions speaks to a lot of things. Like, it historically is just a fact. It speaks to the Japanese dictating their lives. I think Confucianism got its start in China, but it, like, took hold in Japan, and it's more of like a philosophy than a religion.
Right.
So it's a logical philosophizing instead of a deeply spiritual connected to nature. And then the fact that the islanders were able to continue and persist with how they wanted to live speaks to their, like, they're separate but apart but separate, and that they could, like, they need that to make their island work. Like, they really need to be in touch with the nature.
Right.
And then there was that message from the dead that
thinking
young
about
Suk,
that
that was
too.
totally for her.
Yeah.
And Misha said, no, that was
were
for
talking to
me.
me.
Yeah.
And here's how I totally took it, and you didn't think I belonged there, but yet I felt like this gave me peace. This was
Shaman Kin says, like, maybe it was just for both of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and again, back into point of view. Like, when we hear it, it sounds like it's going to Young Suk because that's how she's hearing it, and that's
Right.
a voice who's
and
telling
that's who's
us.
telling us.
But when Mija gives it this new twist, you're like, oh my god! To me, I was like, of course they were talking to you.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Of course.
From Young Suk's perspective, it's like, we found forgiveness. It's like, okay, that means to her maybe that their soul is more at rest. Like, they found forgiveness. This bad thing happened to me, but I found forgiveness. They all said the same thing, which brought her comfort. But Mija's like, well, no, they were talking about me.
Yeah, and Mija agrees with Young Suk. She feels that she perpetrated this betrayal by not saving her family, even though she didn't feel like she had the power to do it. She still felt responsible for it. Like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, at no point do I ever feel that Mija is angry with young Suk or just defensive.
She agrees
She
with her.
She agrees with her, but she's tried hard over and over and over to try to reconnect and have peace with Young Suk, but Young Suk's like, no.
And Young Suk never gave Mija what Dosang gave her. That relief of responsibility for
Right.
this
Mhm.
loss. We see the Kong sisters. One gives the other one release of that
Yeah.
responsibility. And Young Suk never has the ability to give that to Mija, and Mija dies without that.
I wonder if that's because Young Suk's mother died while she was still quite young, and she didn't
Get that maturity.
get that. If let's say if Young Suk's mother had stayed alive, and she was young, she got married. If these other bad things had happened while her mother was around, her mother might have given her a different perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
In some sense, she becomes this motherly child, kind of lost, in the same way that Mija was lost without a mother.
Oh, that's interesting.
It shapes how they are able to view things without that mature connection, motherly connection to help guide them, and in that way.
That's
And
very
she didn't have sisters. She didn't have a sister close enough to her age, like the what do you call the other
Kong
sisters,
sisters.
the Kong sisters.
Mhm.
They were close enough
together.
or were they twins?
Yes, I think
They
you
were
know
either
what?
twins or they
Or
were just really
super
close.
Yeah,
in age.
I kept thinking they were twins.
I think that
And then
they
something
just
else
had a
made
lot
me-
of babies very quickly in
Yes.
this, so I
Yeah.
don't think
Yes.
anybody was really too far apart in age.
Right.
But they're
I think it's
Yeah.
just because their names sounded alike that I just imagined that they were
I
twins,
imagine
but I
them
don't think
twins,
they were.
totally.
No.
Yeah, there was some point where I was like, oh, maybe they're not. Maybe their age is mentioned or something.
I don't know.
There's so much to unpack in this book.
Yeah, we could talk for another hour about it, but
Yeah. I hope that if you haven't read it, we've only intrigued you and not ruined too much.
yeah. I mean, like every time, it's like don't
I hope
listen
you
to
read
it
it.
until you read it first. We say that an hour into the podcast. Oh, if you haven't listened
but you
to
should,
it yet,
it should be known by now.
you should read it.
Yeah.
The last time we ruined a book, you should know.
Yeah, right.
Or the last several times.
Like, it's not a review. We're discussing the finished
That's
book.
right.
Yeah.
It's exactly. But okay, like I said, there's so many great books about. There's a few questions that, not so much questions, but comments. Consider reading Snowflower and the Secret Fan, which follows a lifelong friendship between two women in 19th century China. That's also excellent. And the culture behind young girls in China. They make these fans, and when a fan is folded, all you see is paper, but when you open it up, there's in the folds becomes a way of passing messages.
Ooh,
and
intriguing.
And it's the kind of thing that only happens again within. She talks a lot about female connections, and in that book, there's young girl connections that go throughout their life. If you read the Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane, that apparently there's a place where you can own your own Korean. Oh, to learn how to have your own Korea tea and tasting package for book clubs, click here. That is at lisac.com. She has a place where you can actually.
Got a lot of resources. On
Yes, there's a lot of good websites. Oh, no, that's pretty much.
I'm intrigued by her On Golden Mountain, which tells the story of her Chinese American family settlement in Los Angeles. There's another book that I heard about recently. You know, I'm excited about this wave to tell the true American story, where everyone gets to talk about how they built this country or what was taken from them as that went on.
It's interesting to learn as an adult the things that you really were not taught.
Yep. It's a Western about a Chinese American, like a Chinese family settling in the West. A Western about the West. And it sounded amazing. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it easily.
Well, you can look
It
for it.
was mentioned on NPR recently. So I think learning these true stories is so enlightening, and I'm glad for these authors who are telling these stories to help me see clear.
Yeah.
Speaking of immigrants and their experiences in America, part of Shanghai Girls talks about the founding of Chinatown near Hollywood.
Ooh.
So how that community gets started, and even the culture of the culture of having adopted sons was a way of smuggling people out of China. by one man can have like 45 sons, some of them older than him.
That's so funny.
So
That sounds interesting.
it's very interesting.
Well, because to be Shanghaied is a whole nother thing too.
That's
Right.
well, okay, and then there's
Is that in that book? In the
yeah,
book
it
as well?
is. That
Alright.
there's a reason why that was called that. Although I don't know if the term is culturally appropriate anymore.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's a historical term, even if it's
Yeah.
unfair.
So this was my book. Who had the book before? Who's
It's
got
Katie's turn.
It's Katie's
My turn.
turn.
So, I have a book that I really want to read, but it's a classic. So I'm hoping that neither of you have read it.
Wait, before you announce it.
Yes.
Okay, this book that I mentioned is called "How Much of These Hills Is Gold."
How much of these hills is gold?
So if you're interested in westerns and mysteries and learning more about, different points of view of our country, there you go.
Okay. So I wanted to pick a book that was going to be somewhat spooky, even though The Island of Sea Women is technically our October episode. But if you start listening or reading now, for this will span through Halloween, so I wanted something a little spooky.
Cool.
So the book that I'm hoping that you haven't read,
if it's a spooky book, I probably haven't.
was published in 1938. It's
Oh.
not that spooky. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
No, I've only seen the movie.
Right.
But it's
I've
been a
never
long,
read
long
it.
time.
Okay, good.
I have read other books by her because I find her like a very fascinating writer.
Uh-huh.
Who's it by?
Daphne du Maurier. It is
How do you spell her last name?
DU space Maurier.
Maurier.
There's a new movie coming out about it. And I know
How
there's
there
an
been
older
several
movie.
movies?
Yeah. There's like an old
it's
classic.
It's like a spooky black. I probably haven't seen the black and white, the old black and white one in
There's
a long
new
time.
one coming out with Armie
Yeah.
Hammer and Lily James, I think, are the people in it. Anyway, I have a little blurb about it. So it says the novel begins in Monte Carlo, where our heroine is swept off her feet by the dashing widower Maxim de Winter and his sudden proposal of marriage. Orphaned and working as a lady's maid, she can barely believe her luck. It's only when they arrive at his massive country estate that she realizes how large of a shadow his late wife will cast over their lives, presenting her with a lingering evil that threatens to destroy their marriage from beyond the grave.
It's like a modern Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, it's I have not
It is. Yeah, it totally is.
I have not read it. I am
It's
excited.
a little spookier than that, but that's a great one.
Well,
Okay, good.
I just want to share, because I don't like foolishly using inappropriate terms.
Uh-huh.
I understood Shanghai to be being stolen from the West Coast to be taken away to, kidnapped to Shanghai.
Uh-huh.
It is a culturally insensitive term. I apologize if I upset anyone. But it is historically means that.
Mhm.
They were kidnapping people to go fight in the Opium War. So, it is an offensive term, but it is also a historical term of an action.
So
apologies
if you're
to anyone.
speaking of a historical event, that's one thing. Just don't use it in your modern talk.
No. I really meant historically.
I knew
Right,
you.
when
I knew you.
But I wanted
Well,
to
I
educate
appreciate you
myself
looking
in
that
that
up.
swift moment.
Yes.
I did not mean to. The other offensive term is to coerce someone into something they want to do.
Right.
I didn't mean it that way.
Okay. Well, we hope you read along with us and you enjoyed this book, because we really all enjoyed it seemed.
Yes.
And we hope that you will join us for our next book, Rebecca. So
Wait, any books you read that you loved?
I have not read anything else this month.
This book was very
wait,
consuming.
This was a lot of books. And Karin apparently read 3 other books this
Holy
month.
cow.
So.
Four other books. I'm on my 4th book.
All right.
Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. What's her name? By Ying.
Yeah, that looks good.
So good. Okay, so it's different from the movie,
Of course.
from the
For sure.
series. Both the show and the book are great in their own right. But oh my gosh, you will find yourself yelling and so
Oh.
emotionally connected
Oh.
and cheering, but also
Like in a good way, because this book here that we just finished was almost a little too much for me with the current like state of the world, what happens in the book, the emotional attachment to everybody. And then I was also watching The Vow, which is about like women being misused in occults. So.
Not like that. Not like that.
Okay, yeah.
Not like that.
All right, good.
But Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. I think Ing is NG is how you is
Ning.
the spell.
Yeah.
I think
wait, because Win is so it's maybe new. I don't know. NG.
I'm probably spelling it mispronouncing it, so I'm just gonna spell it NG. So well done. I'm like page 257 of 338, and I started this last weekend.
I'm reading Lovecraft Country, which you said was a great book, and I'm enjoying that show so much. I think it's kind of similar.
I forgot I read Lovecraft.
Well, I think it's sort of, I was almost going to suggest it when you threw up spooky recommendations, but I'm not done, so I don't know if I want to recommend it yet. But Lovecraft Country, the show is amazing on HBO. I'm just at the beginning of the book, but it's very vividly done.
Wow, I'm like reading like four books a month. I'm doing great. Because I'm listening to them. Makes a difference. Listening and reading.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have not read any. You're good. This was
I've
a lot
not
of
read
book.
anything.
This is plenty book.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. This
was a lot of book for
one last thing I want to say about it, because I loved it so much. Probably will re-listen at some point or actually read it. The only other one I felt this strongly about was the Witches of New York, and it's the same. I think for the same reason, like those strong female friendships.
I keep going back to that book and how much I enjoyed it and how much I really want. Because I know there's like a prequel with the same character. Yeah. I want to reread that, and I think
it's
there's
not
maybe
an audiobook, which is actually kind of foolishly that's what gets in the way. I keep looking on Audible and I can't find it.
Huh? I thought I listened.
So maybe
to it,
I just need to read it.
Yeah.
I mean the prequel. It's the birthing chair, I think?
Home or something like that.
Birthing House. Maybe
that sounds right.
I can't find it as an audiobook. Maybe I should read it as my real book.
Got it.
If I see Rebecca and it says Catalan edition, does that mean it's in Spanish?
Probably in Catalan. Yeah.
Well, Catalan. What's Catalan?
It's
what they speak in
Spanish.
Spain.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that specific dialect.
Okay.
Yeah, so don't get the Catalan version.
Unless you speak.
Maybe we should agree on. Well, I don't know if we need to do that, but I remember we all had different versions of Emma. I think you and I had the same Emma, and you had a different Emma.
This one just says by Daphne du Maurier.
Are you going to listen to it, or are you going to read it? We'll take this conversation on.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
I hope you love this book too.